All right, so in the launch video this morning, the launch webinar, we saw this. This is my Dropbox here. I'm sharing too much information with you guys. It's casual. It's okay. We saw this to-do list here. And today we're basically going to go over this to-do list that I built and how it works, what it consists of. But even more than that, I really want to show you guys how to maybe structure your JavaScript applications when using Kendo UI. And then we had several questions on, what IDE do you use? How do you use this with ASP.NET or MVC or Visual Studio? And I'm going to kind of address that as well. I want to make it really clear that Kendo UI is in no way related to a single server-side technology. So, your PHP, Rails, MVC, it's kind of agnostic of all those technologies. You can use whatever you want. Personally, I'm a Rails guy personally. That's my preference, so I tend to use TextMate, but I do have a lot of respect for MVC and PHP and Node.js and some of the other ones out there. So if you're not used to seeing Visual Studio, MVC, Microsoft-type technologies, don't be taken aback by that. That's really not what's important here. What's important here is that we look at how Kendo UI works and kind of you guys get an idea about how you can structure your JavaScript application. And I just had someone request if I could do some singing. Maybe I'll do some singing at the end. I don't know. Stick around. Let's start with some introductions. My name is Burke Holland. You can find me on Twitter at Burke Holland. I'm here. If you're not familiar with Twitter, these are all kind of responses. So I don't tweet that much, not terribly noisy. If I check in at McDonald's on Foursquare, you won't know. I promise. I don't post that stuff to Twitter. I am on Facebook, but really only when I want to know what my wife is cooking for dinner. So not on there all the time. Kendo UI, you should definitely follow Kendo UI, and a bunch of people are following me right now. This is great. Awesome. This is why I love webinars and speaking. Beautiful. Thank you, Andrew. Okay, Kendo UI, you guys should definitely follow Kendo UI. This is where you get all of the Kendo UI goodness and the updates, and here's Korchev. He's actually team lead on Kendo UI, announcing that Kendo UI is now available as a NuGet package. So you get these nuggets of beautiful and useful information on Kendo UI. I would highly recommend following Kendo UI if you don't already. And then we have my partner on Kendo UI Evangelism, Mr. John Bristow, holding it down in Sydney, Australia. He can answer any questions you have on Kendo. We'd love to talk with you about it. So feel free to just bombard him. And of course, we have our VP, Todd, who will get back to you if you can. And if not, he'll may forward it to me. Say, can you get back? And I, of course, will. My blog is Shiny New Me. It's a ridiculous URL, but it should be one that you have no problem remembering just because it is that ridiculous. So I post a lot of what I think are good things here, HTML5 resources and things like that, as well as tutorials on how to build things, tips for the international traveler. I may give you the occasional picture of Will Ferrell from Old School. It's really nice right there. Feel free to check me out here. I blog here as well as on the Kendo UI blog, so you can find me in both of those places. All right, we've got an hour, and I've wasted 8 minutes of your precious time already talking about me, so let's move on to the Kendo UI to-do list. I'm going to go over this again in case there are some people that didn't see it. This is kind of running on my local host. You can find this application online, exact same application hosted at the Kendo ToDo.apphb.com. So exact same application. I'm going to run it locally so we can kind of break in and look at the code and check out the IDE and have a lot more fun there. But just so you know, it's not vaporware. It does actually exist, and you can get there. I know one of the questions is going to be, how do we get these resources? Don't worry. If you follow me on Twitter, you can get all the resources. I'll put a blog post up on Kendo UI with the resources. We'll get a retweet from Kendo UI and the resources, so we'll do all we can. I'll give you this project to download and play around with yourself, and hopefully you'll get everything that you need. So with that, let's get going here. I'm going to hang out on my local host here for just a second, and Just a quick look at the to-do list. Give me a minute while I minimize this GoToWebinar control panel. Perfect. Now I can see my whole screen. So here we go. This is the Kendo UI to-do list, and up here at the top we kind of have two modes. We have a single update mode and a batch update mode. And at the top we have this network activity panel, and this is a Kendo UI widget, and it's expanding and collapsing panels here. Really, really cool widget. You can stack them on top of each other. For our purposes, I just used one, but you can use many, many. And in single update mode, we kind of have this idea of being able to add an item, or maybe we add two items, and those items are appended to the list. And if we take a look at the network activity, we'll see that, oh, things are happening. So I'm capturing the responses and showing them here. Of course, you're very welcome to pull up the developer tools, which is F12. If you're on Windows, you can do Control-Shift-I. And this is the Chrome developer tools, and you'll get the same kind of thing here, but I just kind of added it at the top to, I don't know, just so it's kind of there right in front so you can see what's happening. So you can see that I created an item, I read, I've got this JSON response back, and that's exactly what gets popped down here into the items. And if I edit this item down here and say add an item that is so awesome, and then I just hit enter, you can see that we posted with an update, and this is what was sent to the server, and the server sends back and is like, cool, I got that. Here's your actual object that got saved to the persistent data store. The other option we have here is to run in batch update mode. And what batch update mode does is it queues up your changes on the client side, and we'll go into this more in detail. And then it allows you to get those changes up to your server in batch updates. So let's take a look at how to do that. I can create a new thing here, and then I can edit this new thing and make it a new thingy, because that's better than a new thing. And then I can come here and decide that I don't want to do these two. And what you'll see here is that the create took place. And the reason why that we want to do that is because we want to have items created on the data source and before they're in our page. You don't have to do that. That's just the way I implement it. But you can see that there's no deletes or updates. But as soon as I hit save changes, you're going to get one of both. So here's the update. We changed new thing to new thingy, and this is what was sent to the server. And this syntax is a little bit weird. I'll talk about this in a second. And then over here on this delete batch, you can see that we have two items that actually got sent to the server at the same time. So what would have been 3 different calls to the server now becomes 2. And really, you know, if you were deleting 5, 6, 7, 20 items instead of 20 different calls to the server, you just have 1. And the responses look very similar. In the update is a void, so there's no response. But in the delete here, it's kind of giving us back what's left of our data set after we deleted those couple of items. So at a very high level, this is kind of what we're looking at today. And we're going to talk about how I put this together. And we're also going to talk about some kind of high level, how you should structure your app with JavaScript. That's really not specific to Kendo UI, but I'm hoping that it'll give you guys a really good idea of how you can get started. And so we'll look at the power of the data source, and then we'll just cover kind of some best practices as well. I would encourage you guys to try this out on your mobile device because it's amazing. You can hit thise edits, and of course you don't have an enter key necessarily on, say, your iPhone, but I've added this checkbox over here on the side which does essentially the same thing. So I would recommend that we check this out on your iPhone or your Android device and just see how these things work with touch, because it's pretty cool. And these widgets up here work quite well as well. This is a little tab control, and we'll look at this as well. All right, so I think we've beat the app to death. We're good. Let's close this down and jump into the code. Actually, I'm going to close up all of my Twitter windows here. I know that I promised no slides, but I did not promise no tabs, so I feel like I'm good there. All right, so here's my Visual Studio project. And again, let me just reiterate to everybody, it's absolutely not necessary to use any one specific IDE. Kendo UI is an HTML5 framework, which means everything is happening on the client, and how you choose to interface with the server is completely up to you. And I know that sometimes there's some confusion, especially those of us that have done a lot of server-side programming in the past, myself included in that group, with what exactly does that mean. And so I hope to clarify some of that for everybody here in this webinar. So this is the kind of starting point where I'm going to jump off. This is the what we call the layout in ASP.NET MVC, similar to a master page if you like web forms. Also very similar to PHP master pages or partials. I'm not a PHP guy, so I don't want to claim that I know too much there, but we kind of have the same concept in Rails, PHP, MVC, web forms. And what this basically does is, at the top, I'm pulling in some JavaScript and CSS files, as well as a sweet little favicon of my Kendo UI dude. And then you can see that down here I'm rendering the body, and this render body is actually what's rendering the to-do list itself. All this right here is the header. So up till now this is pretty straightforward. We're just going to look at the HTML and then I'll come back. I do want to note though that at the top of my page I've included Modernizer. If you're not familiar with Modernizer, you can check out modernizer.com. This is a library that basically allows you to programmatically know at runtime what your browser is capable of. It's an absolute must-have for HTML5 development. Next is the jQuery include I have. And you know, let me preface this by saying that I try to implement a lot of best practices, but this is by no means perfect, and we'll talk about that. And I'll even point out some places where I could have done things a little bit differently. But it's a good idea to use a CDN reference in jQuery. But you can actually take out this HTTP like this and use a protocol relative URL, which is something that Paul Irish talks about it. I'm not sure if he was the one that figured that out, but this is pretty cool. It kind of just says if I'm running on HTTP, then request jQuery off of HTTP. If not, then request it off of the secure socket layer. And that stops that weird little pop-up that we get in Internet Explorer that says you're accessing unsecured content. I'm sure many of you have seen that before, so that's kind of how you get rid of that. The next thing that I've included down here is the Kendo scripts. So I basically have 3 libraries that I've included in my application. And I'm going to bump out the scripts folder here and show you guys how I have this laid out. These libraries are these things that we are using on which to build our application. So Modernizer is a pre-built library that we're going to use. jQuery is not included here, but could be. I'm using a CDN reference. And then I have dropped in Kendo. Now, when we launched yesterday, we included a bundler for Kendo. So I've got everything that Kendo has to offer. So I've got the full, all of the widgets and everything. But you can go through and actually pick which ones you want if you do if you go the commercial route, and you can actually bundle just what you need. So in our case, if we're just using that sliding panel and the tab control, that's really all we need. But for the demo purposes, I've got actually like the whole kit and caboodle up here. So let's bump over and see what the actual to-do list itself looks like. This render body that I just talked about, that's actually going to load up this index. So to give you just a quick primer on MVC and how this works, what's going to happen is when the app's loaded up, it's going to have a starting point and it's going to visit this home controller. And this home controller is basically just going to say, load up this page right here. So it's going to load up the master is going to render the body, and the body is going to be this index page here. I'm not going to go into too much of the specifics of MVC because I don't want to get wrapped up in the whole kind of server-side technicalities because they're really not that important. So let's jump over here and look at the index file. You can see at the top here I'm including this model. This is specific to MVC. I'm basically just passing in some information from the server as the page loads, saying here are some things that you may want to know about. Actually, here are some things you are definitely going to need to know about in order to work. So that's what I'm doing here. I pass in a description, a title, and then a mode. And the reason for that is we have 2 modes, a single mode and a batch mode, and I didn't want to write duplicate code. So I just pass it in and I let the application load up the JavaScript file for the right mode. If we look at the top here, this is just the title. And this is that save button that we had, which is only visible in batch mode. And then we've got this text box and the add button to add new items. And then down here at the bottom, I'm including below the document ready all of my separate JavaScript files. And then just above that, you'll see this this function. This is the jQuery document ready. So this basically says, after all my DOM elements are loaded and after all my scripts are loaded, execute this function. And there's this little business up here where I am setting this root variable, and what this basically does is allows me to get the root of the application, no matter if I'm developing locally or if I actually push it to a server and have a dedicated URL. So this is kind of something that is not an issue. This is a fix that I'm kind of putting in specifically for MVC. And then I'm setting that here, a variable on this application. And then I'm passing in the mode that we're using, and then I initialize the application. This right here is just a little bit of CSS3 niceness that I put in to make the app a little bit more sexy. And then this turns on our panel bar. So this is kind of what happens on document load. And we'll take a minute here and we'll go in and take a look at that in more depth. But before we do that, let's kind of take a look at the structure of the application. Specifically, JavaScript-wise, the application is structured into libraries, which we talked about, modules. You can think of modules as all the little different items that I created to make this application work, and then the core, or what I'm calling the application core. In a large-scale JavaScript application, and the to-do list is by no means a large-scale application, right? This is a very simple application. But in a large-scale application, it's typically a good idea to take all of your JavaScript logic and separate it into modules that could kind of be dropped on any page and used outside of the application. So they're not dependent on each other. And then normally you would have a facade, and the facade, which I'm not using, talks between the modules and the core is kind of the constructor of the symphony, and he's kind of saying, yes, you can do this, no, you can't do that, receiving commands and events, and then sending those out to the right people to take care of things. So this is the way that I've structured my JavaScript. There's a lot of debates on how to structure large-scale applications. I encourage you to read up more about that online. In fact, in my blog post, I'll put together kind of what I've used in the past to structure large-scale JavaScript operations. And so that's kind of the application setup. Now, let's take a look at exactly how this application works. To do that, I'm going to open up this core file. Now, the core file, if you're not familiar with this syntax, it can be a tad daunting. What we have here is a variable called app, and I've set that equal to a function, and this is what's commonly referred to in JavaScript as the revealing module pattern. And so JavaScript doesn't really have public or private variables and functions per se, but you can kind of mock that behavior by using closures. So that's what we're doing here. So I basically have this pub variable, and anything that I declare off the pub variable will be accessible because that's what I return at the very bottom. Anything that's not declared off the pub is actually a private function. This is just a common pattern. It's called revealing module. It can be a little bit confusing to look at if this is the first time you've seen it. So I encourage you to kind of look at more of that. But what's happening here is that when the initialization function is called, which is the first thing that happens in document ready, what we do is we bind to an event on this template item loaded, and then we take a couple of different actions. So I'm using templates to render out on the page these to-do list items. And the templates are actually sitting up here in this content folder, and they look like this. And there's actually two of them. The to-do is each one of these little bars over here that you see. So the to-do template is each one of these right here. And then the log item template or log entry template is each one of these tab items that you would see in here. So each one of these is actually a templated item. And we're going to use the data source to build those on the fly. So this is kind of what a template looks like. This is the template for each item. And you'll notice that I have like, this is a list item, and I have some buttons in here, and then the text box, and then the save buttons. And you'll see kind of this weird syntax here where it says item and then this pound equals ID pound. And this is me constructing an ID. And so basically jQuery allows you to do templating with jQuery, and Kendo UI. And you have two options here when templating, but this is the kind of the syntax. And so your syntax would always be something like this, like pound equals and then the name of your field and then pound. And this right here will get replaced in the template by the value from your data set. You can also do, if you're more comfortable doing something like this, that's totally cool too. We don't discriminate against your need to use $signs and curly brackets, so we will recognize both of those as being valid templating syntax. So once we've got this template built, what we're going to do is we're going to use the data source to generate that template and pump some data into it. And one thing we need to talk about before we look at the data source is the concept of Kendo UI models. Now, Kendo UI, it doesn't have what I would call a full-fledged MVC framework yet. If you're familiar with Backbone or some of these others that are really full-featured, it features kind of a lightweight models and views architecture that allows you to stay really, really nimble, but gives you the functionality of working with models and not having to work with the raw data itself. So the way that you define a model is kind of the way that I've done here. And you'll notice that in each of our models, we actually have two properties. We have ID, and then we have name. And it would really look like this. The way Kendo UI models work is that you don't have to specify this. It really just needs to know what the ID is, because the ID is how it tracks what needs to be changed. So if you want to specify the other fields in your data source, you can totally do that. But what's going to happen here automatically is that the model will actually push those other properties, or Kendo UI will push those other properties onto your collection of model objects, and it'll take care of that for you. So like I said, really lightweight, really simple to use. That's all you have to do to get rolling with a model. Right here, this template is the Kendo templating syntax for the template that we're going to use to create the items. And then I'm creating a data source here, which we'll take a look at in just a second. And then we're going to wire up all of our events, and then this read kind of says, all right, let's get started, read the data from the server. Let's take a look at the data source, and I'm keeping an eye on time here. I don't want to go too long because I do want to have some time for questions. The data source is included over here in the modules, and we have two, batch and single. So depending on, over here in the index file, depending on what our mode is, I'm dynamically passing in that JavaScript file here. So depending on what our mode is, you may get one or the other. If we look at the single data source, this is that same revealing module pattern where I'm setting this data source variable equal to this function that returns this pub object. In the initialization, we are creating a data source, and this is the syntax for creating a new Kendo data source. And then you'll notice here that I've got this read, create, destroy, and update, and this is basically defining how you're going to talk to the server for each one of these actions. Now what's great about this is that the data source at its lowest level is wrapping the jQuery.ajax. So if there's something on the Ajax object itself that you want to touch, you can just pass that down here. And what I mean by that is there's options such as you can specify something called traditional in the jQuery Ajax, and you can just set that to true. And this is totally cool with Kendo UI. You can just pass this right on down, and it will pass that to the jQuery Ajax function at the base. Another thing that's really cool here is that depending on what technology you're using, MVC is totally cool with me the way I've got it set up, passing pretty much everything in as a post besides the read, which is a get. But you'll have things like Rails that will say really the right way to do this is to make this a delete action. So you can just change the type right there, and that's all you have to do. Same thing with a put, just put, and it'll take care of that for you. So that's what a data source looks like. Down here in the schema, I've just set the model equal to the model. Now, you're kind of asking, where does that model come from? The model was passed in as a parameter to the constructor here. And then, very important, on the change event of the data source, we're going to take those templates and run them through the model, and we're going to get out the other side our actual UI. Now the change event is fired whenever the data in the data source changes. So when it does a read or when it retrieves data from the server, the data will change and it will fire this event and it will update the UI where necessary using that template that we just talked about. Another thing to point out here is that I'm kind of passing in this jQuery and Kendo, and you may be asking, why are you doing that? Isn't $ always jQuery? Well, yes, maybe, but it's typically a good idea to pass in all of your library references because in the spirit of loose coupling, we don't want to couple too tightly in case we decide to switch out later on to a different library. So I'm just passing those in there. Let's take a look at the batch data source because it's just a smidgen different than the single. Actually, a smidgen different, a little bit more verbose. So you can see that I've set traditional to true here on these, as I was talking about before, and that's because MVC is going to expect our parameters to come in a certain way due to its parameter mapping. And so some of this stuff I'm doing specifically for my implementation, and you may or may not need it depending on what you're doing. But the other thing to note here that's different is this parameter map. And the parameter map, you're probably thinking, what's the parameter map? So what parameter map does is it catches before your request actually goes through and allows you to pretty much monkey with the request. So if you just were to call a read, you can get control over actually what's sent to the server by looking at the type. Now, to me, for the batch updates, the read is fine. I'm not sending any parameters. I'm just asking for stuff. But if it's not a read, I need to format these things specially. And so I'm basically looping through each model here, and then I'm formatting the string that I'm going to send to the server. Again, this is me making some concessions for MVC, may or may not be applicable when you use it with a different server technology. And I want to show you really quick what that looks like. We had this kind of funky syntax when we did these batch updates. And so we could say delete this and save the changes, and then we could look at it. And so here's this funky syntax, and we're doing this in the parameter map, but what that allows us to do is on the server side, if we take a look at a little bit of .NET, and if you're not a .NET fan, bear with me real quick. I think all server-side languages are great, and it just depends on what you're trying to do. But when we did the delete, we actually called delete batch, and we passed in this collection of items. And we were able to do that, and when this comes in, it actually comes in as a collection of items. And I'll show you exactly what I mean. I'm just going to pop a breakpoint on there, and then we'll run this. And don't worry, if you're thinking, man, why in the world did you allow people to update things to the server? It's stored in the session, so you can't do too much damage. But if we take a look at this batch update mode, and we do some deletes here, and then save our changes, see if we can't catch a break here. And then if we look at this, it's automatically mapped into our server-side function. We didn't do anything special to do this besides that parameter map. And this just makes it really easy to work with. We modify our data collection, and then we just send back what's left in the collection. Super simple. That kind of is at a high level how the to-do list works. The other thing that I want to talk about is the way that I did the capturing of the network requests. And of course you can, you don't need to do, and let me add some new items back. You don't need to use my network capture. It's perfectly fine to use your browser tools. And if you do that, let's see here, there we go. You want to refresh so we can catch some browser action. And if you do that, then you'll see here that you can actually come down here and you can see there's the same action. So I'm kind of just capturing this, And of course, we deleted all the data, so there's nothing to send back. But here's that same syntax that we were just looking at. And I'm just displaying it up here at the top in a little bit of a different manner. So just like this. So there we go. Same thing. And looking at the response. Let's jump back over here and take a quick look at that. Basically, what I did was I attached some event listeners, and jQuery has these pretty cool send and complete listeners. And on the send, I basically generate an ID for the cross-site request, or excuse me, the remote data request. And then when the request comes back, guess what's still on the XHR object, the ID. So we can actually match them up, put one in the request tab, one in the response tab. And then here, I'm just selecting everything that has a class of tab strip and say, make it a tab strip. So very easy to create this kind of robust interface at the top for capturing these network requests, just using some basic jQuery and then a couple of Kendo UI widgets. The other thing that's important to notice here is that I'm loading in templates. So we've got two templates, right, the to-do and the log entry. And I'm actually using a module to do that. Now, you don't have to load them in externally. You could actually do, if you had a JavaScript file, you can actually set a variable equal to, so you could say something like window.template equals, and then you could do some stuff like this where you actually have the syntax of the item. What I did was I've actually kept them as HTML files here in the content, and I'm loading them in when the application loads up. So I'm doing requests back to the server and getting these files, so the log entry and the to-do templates. And let's see, I'm getting lost here in all the tab goodness. And let's see here, what's up in the core? Yes, there we go. So I'm loading these external templates by passing in our root and saying, get me this template. And then I'm using a lot in this application of the idea of event dispatching and listening. And so I'm basically saying, load this template, and when you're done, fire this event. And anybody that's listening to this event will then react. Same thing with the log entry. So you may be thinking, so where's that at? It's right here. So I'm waiting for this template to load, and then when that template loads, then I'm going to go ahead and start setting everything up. So this is kind of a way to handle the asynchronous nature of JavaScript, because JavaScript's not going to wait for this request to get back before it fires this one. It just kind of bam, 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 does as many as it can do, blows through, and you have to be able to handle that whole kind of asynchronous madness. So that's what I'm doing there. The other thing that I did in this application was, you'll notice that in the, if we take a look at the template, you have this, here's the delete button, but there's no click event on the delete button. And the reason for that is something that is, you'll commonly hear referred to as unobtrusive JavaScript. And one of the ways that you may commonly see this done is that you'll see something similar to this, where they select the item. You probably wouldn't have an ID and a class. How about just a class? And then they'll say click, and then they'll have a function that runs, and they'll do something there. You can do that. Another thing that I actually stole from Todd, because it was just such a good idea, was the idea of having binding to all of the data attributes. So data is kind of this new catch-all for in HTML5, where we can say data dash whatever you want. Now, Kendo UI uses this a lot when it can. So if like you create a grid, you can actually define the grid by using these data elements. So I've got these buttons, and I've said this, anytime you see this data event, go ahead and attach an event listener that has this same name. And that is taken care of over here in the events file. So this is really just a good way to kind of segment out the different portions of your application, so things are only doing one job. So this file, its whole job is to listen for events and to react. And basically I'm saying here, I'm delegating any of these, any class that has kButton, attach a click event to it, and if the click event is contained in this data dash event, and then here's all the events down here. Now, when I said that this application was not perfect, I was serious. And here's a good example of that. I'm actually referencing the core from one of my modules, which is not a great idea. Be better to pass that in or actually work with some intermediary layer to do that. And then I'm additionally working with the DOM here. So also not such a great idea. You would probably want to dispatch another event to a module that specifically handles your document manipulation. But for brevity and I guess just to get the app on, sometimes you just want to get something done, and you're like, I'm just gonna cram this in and get this done. I'll come back later and refactor. And you never do. That's fine. We've all been there. But these are each of the events, and each of the events is handled here. And let's take a look at some of those events. On the create event, actually let's bump down, look at the edit event because it's a little bit more straightforward. I'm basically, let me see here. I have to save edit. So a lot of this is me manipulating the DOM, but on the save edit, you can see that I'm getting the ID off the item, basically with just kind of plain Jane jQuery. And then I'm getting off of the data source this model object that I need to update. And that's as easy as calling this data source.get and passing in the ID. And it will return to you the model object associated with that ID. And then I just do a set. And what property do you want to set? Name. Cool. And then the value that you want to set it to. Now, at this point, the data source knows that this object is dirty. But it's not going to do anything if it's in batch mode. If it's in single mode, it will happen when the data source is called sync. And let me back and explain that a little bit more. The data source has two modes. One of the modes is single, and the other mode is batch. In single mode, it's going to send everything in a transaction by itself. And in batch mode, it's going to lump them all together as much as it can, so it'll put all the deletes in one transaction, all of the updates in one transaction, and so on and so forth. The sync method here is called, and when this is called, the data source takes everything that's changed in the model and pushes it up to the server. So if we're in single mode, we just want to sync right away, right? Just send it and let's get on with our lives. But if we're in batch mode, we're actually going to hold off. So if we're in batch mode, this sync never gets called, data never gets sent to the server. The only thing that knows that's changed is the data source. And we're just kind of waiting. And so we can edit, update, delete, and then when we finally hit that save all button, we can push all of those changes to the server with one line of code. So data source.sync. So the data source is super powerful in regards to the fact that if you use models, you can concentrate on updating your models, and you can let the data source handle when it's time to sync with the server. You basically tell it to sync. You say, okay, I'm ready, sync now, and it's kind of like a save all, and it will go ahead and synchronize for you. And then it will regenerate your UI or update your UI based on what has changed. And that's exactly what's happening here. So now that we've been through the code, let's jump back out and take one more quick look here. So this is the template that we have, and actually no items came up because I deleted them all, but we'll add a new item. So when we did that, we had a request go to the server, it came back, the template was used, run through the data source, and we have a new item. When I click on the edit, say new item thing, we've been through all this, but this just kind of shows you, and I'm in batch update mode, so you'll notice that we didn't get a change there. And actually, you notice I just updated it, but if I click delete, you would expect to see an update and then a delete. And what you'll see instead is just the delete. Because the data source is smart. It knows. You just deleted that. There's no point in me doing an update and then a delete. So the Kendo UI Data Source is a really, really powerful way to interact with your data. The to-do list, of course, is a very super simple functionality-wise application. It's not doing a whole lot, but I created it to kind of show off a couple of things. Number one, the power of the data source. The data source is extremely flexible. It's extremely easy to work with, and because it carries a very lightweight model view architecture, you don't have to know a whole lot about the whole MVC and JavaScript to make it work really, really well. You can do, of course, the single updating. It supports the batch updating. So it's just a very powerful way to get started with your applications. Another one of the questions that I did want to answer was, I saw a lot of people asking, like, how does this work with my database? And the answer to that is Kendo UI works with any database. And it's basically working over some standardized protocols or ways to structure data like XML or JSON. And I think pretty much everybody's familiar with XML, but if you're not familiar with JSON, JSON is this kind of weird brackety syntax that we've been seeing all throughout this tech chat, and it's kind of a way to represent objects in JavaScript. And so Kendo UI doesn't really know anything about the data source. The server handles that. Kendo UI just talks to the server over this JSON. Of course, you could use XML. There's other formats including OData, which really is JSON, but is kind of a standardization on that, fully supported by the data source. I would encourage you guys and girls, of course, to check out the Kendo UI. I always leave off the O. There we go. There's a bunch of great demos in here in regards to looking specifically at the data source and how the data source works with some of the components. So it kind of works with each one of the widgets, but it works outside of the widgets all by itself if you want to use it that way as well. And up until just recently, actually, my application had no Kendo UI widgets in it, which is kind of weird. You know, you're like, isn't that what Kendo UI is all about? No, it's so much more than that. It is the data source. It is interoperability with other JavaScript libraries. So Kendo UI kind of aims to be everything that you're going to need for an extremely feature-rich application that's fully HTML5 compatible. But if there's something that you want to plug in because you just like it and you want to use it, Kendo UI does not stand in your way. So if you decide that you wanted to use, let's say, Knockout, Knockout is an MVVM pattern. We even have demos for you on how you can use Knockout.js with Kendo UI. So we also have demos on how you can use jQuery templates with Kendo UI. So again, we don't want to stand in your way, absolutely not. I would suggest that you consider the templating. Kendo UI has a huge focus on performance, and so we've tweaked and tweaked and tweaked and tweaked things like templates and grid and things like that to be the best possible performance as far as that goes. However, we're definitely not going to impose anything on you, and you're free to intermix as you wish. So I think I ran right at about an hour and 47 minutes. I want to be respectful of everybody's time, and so I know everybody's like waiting for me to stop talking and ask questions so you can get your Kendo UI shirt, or more, maybe you're more interested in the Angry Bird. So I'm actually going to pop out my webinar slide here. There we go. Okay, so a couple questions. First question, let's see. In the very beginning of the demo, I had included a Modernizer HTML5 library, and my question to you would be, who is the creator of Modernizer? Now, I know that you all have internet, so you can just look this up, but we'll just take the first person that can respond. No, that is not correct. Somebody said Paul Irish. You know, that's okay. Paul Irish is a contributor, and I actually made that mistake as well. I was doing a talk, and the guy who invented its girlfriend, yes, correct. The answer is Farouk Ates. So we do have a winner here. I am writing your name down, and what I would like for you to do, Mara, is you know what, I'll go ahead and respond to you here, and I'll type my email address, and you can send me over your information, and I will get it to you. Oh, Adrian, you're so close, so close. All right, let's do another question. I've got another. Don't worry, there's another Angry Bird. There's more stuff to give out. When I was showing the event binding in jQuery, what is the jQuery event that we use to handle events that are fired? I'm watching things come in over here. Ah, yes, we have a winner. All right. Yes, correct. Well, that was kind of a confusing question. I agree. Not bind, but I was looking for delegate, so I will go ahead and send you my email address, and we will get together, and I will get you your Angry Bird as well, and all your Kendo UI swag. So let's go ahead. I'm going to try to take a look at some questions here. I don't know if Todd's been fielding some of these or not, but let's see. Oh, everybody likes the Kendo UI gear. The goodies should the goodies be buyable? The goodies should totally be buyable. I think we need to set up a Kendo UI online store for everybody. Let's see here. A lot of people that everybody wants an Angry Bird. I understand. So I would love to see a full recommended way to do the scripts facade. You know, I totally agree. I think my next step on this application is going to be to kind of implement that facade with the core and get it split out so that it's more solid. So definitely follow Kendo UI on Twitter. Follow me if you want to follow me on Twitter. That'd be great. I'd love to have new followers. And I will be working on a blog post, and we'll continue to refine this, and hopefully this can be a jumping off point for you, not just in getting started with Kendo UI, but you know, how do I get started with JavaScript development in a JavaScript heavy application? Let me see, are there plans for talks for deeper integration of Kendo with Just Code? Oh, that's a great question. If you're watching the let me jump back over here. I've got a virtual machine running inside of OS 10, and sometimes it's not very nice to me. Okay, so see these lines here? This is Just Code. Just Code is a Telerik product that makes your Visual Studio experience just so much more awesome. And what I would like to show you is, because this is such a great question, is I believe Mr. Bristow. Let's see if I can just guess what his GitHub account name is. John Bristow on GitHub. Yes. Just Code templates for Kendo UI. So here we go. So github.com/John Bristow, and you can go ahead and pull these in, and he has already created these Just Code templates for you to make your Visual Studio development very awesome. And let's see, what else have we got here? Anywhere I can download the sample to do code. Yes, we will. If you're following Kendo UI or you just want to check on the blogs later, there's actually, I think I posted an earlier version, but I've made some tweaks before that. And so if you're not following me on Twitter, this is a great reason to follow me on Twitter so you can get the Kendo ToDo code. But we'll try to get it out in every possible way that we can and post it everywhere. Let's see, what level code module does actual interaction with the backend persistent database occur? We deal with legacy databases, so we need to build our stuff at this point, right? So that's kind of, I think, the confusion a lot of times with jQuery sort of based user interface in HTML5 is kind of like, how do I bind to my database? I know I kind of brushed over that maybe somewhat quickly, but that's a great question. I kind of showed it here, but basically what you're going to do is expose parts of your server code to be called by Kendo UI. And then once you get back your JSON or XML and you've kind of serialized that into an object, if you're using, in fact, just about every web server-side language, PHP, Node, Rails, MVC, have fantastic support for JSON. And so you're not going to have a whole lot of trouble there. And so you kind of set up these methods, and then once you get the object, you can transfer that to a user-defined object, and then you can update your data store, and then you can actually respond to the Kendo UI widget that's calling with a JSON response. And again, see those. So this .json is just part of MVC. There's nothing special that you have to do this, and it takes this object that I was working with, formats it as JSON, and responds to the widget. So super easy to work with, but it does require you to sort of abstract away. You're not going to bind the widgets directly to your database. You're going to bind those widgets. You're going to call web events or web methods with those widgets, and those web methods will take care of updating your database and responding to the UI. Let me jump back over here. Hopefully I answered that well enough. That's always a confusing point for me too. I would like to see a blog post about guidance on hitting WCF services in Kendo UI in a secure manner. I think that's a great question as well. Definitely something we can think about doing. Let me see. I feel so sorry for the people that answered and just weren't able to get an Angry Bird. Seriously, I do. If it makes you feel better, I'm not getting an Angry Bird either. This is sample, yes. +1 for the Kendo UI swag store. We've got to do that. I'm thinking like swag.kendoui.com would be so awesome. And also, if you're around and you go to conferences, we try to be pretty much everywhere, especially most Microsoft conferences were there, JSConf, jQuery conferences. We'll have a booth, and so if you can get your company to pay for it, or if you're self-employed and you make it out, come see us. We'll hook you up. We always carry a bunch of that stuff on us. Let me see. Got some other questions. Oh, I'm sorry. That doesn't make you feel better. So when will Kendo UI be available to Ultimate Collection subscribers? That's kind of a question specific to people that currently own the Telerik Ultimate Collection. I believe that as of right now, Premium Collection, Ultimate Collection subscribers can get Kendo UI. I'm looking for Todd here to maybe chime in on that. Yes, that is correct. I'm not sure. I believe if you go and you log in to telerik.com, you should be able to get at the downloads KendoUI.com using your Telerik username and password. What else? Telerik will be at Codapalooza. Yes, we will. When will Kendo UI Mobile be available for download? Oh man, great question. Mobile stuff looks so great, doesn't it? Very soon. I wish I had a more specific date. I've been seeing some dates fly around internally, but I can tell you that it will be very soon once they kind of settle on that. Let's see. I was not able to get to Kendo UI from my account. I just tried. Okay, so Todd, am I correct in the assumption that people should be able to log in with their Telerik account? Okay. Let me see here. Correct. I think he's saying that if you don't see the download, we're getting everything updated. We've got some. Launch week has been big. Yes, we're working on getting the licenses updated for Kendo UI. So just kind of keep your eye on that. The response to Kendo UI has been absolutely overwhelming, and so we're trying to. Yeah, Todd's recommending to download the free trial for now, and I totally agree. There's no license key to unlock it, so you're welcome to go ahead and grab the trial. Let me see here. Since Kendo UI is split into 3 products, must they be purchased separately? Currently, when you purchase Kendo UI currently right now, you're getting the data visualization components included. I believe once the mobile components come out, there will be very soon it will kind of be split into 3 different areas. So you'll have the web, you'll have the data visualization, which is a lot of the charts and stuff, and really good stuff, data visualization. And then we'll have the mobile, and so you'll be able to pick and choose. You can get 1 of those or 2 of those, or you can get all 3 of those. So you don't have to purchase them separately. and I believe right now that we're going to, there's one price right now, and that's going to get you the data viz and the web. But eventually, when everything is out, you can buy them all together packaged, or you can buy them separately, kind of whatever floats your boat. Let me see, anything else? Let's see. Yes, if you have a Telerik account, you logged in, and things don't look maybe quite right, just kind of bear with us. We are working on getting that. Which OS license is being used? Can we create derivative works? Wow, what a question. That's a licensing question. So the open source license is GPL v3. And can you create derivative works? I'm kind of deferring to my panel of experts on that, waiting for an answer. If you want to get more information about exactly what the GPL v3 license allows you to do, just you can go ahead and Google GPL v3 and kind of read up on that. I know licensing is confusing, but the word I'm getting is that if your derivative work is GPL v3 compatible, then yes, you're cool. So it's what's referred to as a copyleft license. Will Kendo UI Mobile have the same look and feel as Kendo UI Web, or will it contain its own IDE? Now, I kind of think of IDE as being like Visual Studio or TextMate or what you choose to use. As far as it having the same look and feel, the Kendo UI Mobile is kind of aimed to allow you to write native applications for devices using HTML5. Because if you're like me and you want to write device applications, but maybe you don't know Objective-C or you don't know Java and the Android platform, that's understandable. That's definitely me too. And what we would like to do is we're aiming to be able to get you a toolkit where you can build HTML5 mobile apps, and then you can phone gap those down to a device and run them natively and take advantage of native device functionality. That's where we're headed with that. And that's going to be absolutely amazing. I've been fighting to get my hands on more of that, and I cannot wait. So definitely keep your head up and check that out. Let's see. Let me see here. Tons of questions, all really good ones. I remember saying that you can use jQuery AJAX options like traditional. Yes. I'm assuming we can add a success callback. Yes. So the data grid has a success callback. It also has an error callback that you can attach to. Let's see here. Did I miss any? I think that's just about it, and we're just over the amount of time. So I've already gotten emails from the two people that I'm going to send your swag to, and I will try so hard to get that in the mail today. And I want to thank everybody so much for coming. Hopefully I was able to explain this in a way that made a lot of sense. And shortly we'll put this webinar up, and I will watch the webinar myself on YouTube with my wife and let her laugh at me. And then we'll also post the code, blog posts and stuff like that, so that you can get the code here. And then if you want to check it out right now, of course, I'll put this up on the screen for those that are hanging out still. If you forgot the URL, but if you want to go and just check out the to-do list, it is this kendo2do.apphb.com. which is kind of short for App Harbor Hosting, which is a great service, and you can just, of course, right-click, and it's really all JavaScript and HTML, CSS, so you're good there. You can check out all the scripts here. I didn't minify or link any of them because I want you to be able to see all of them, so you should be able to see all that. Well, Modernizer, but that's not me. All right. I think that's it. I want to thank everybody so much for coming to this technical chat. I really wish we all could have been in the same room. I think that would have been a really, really cool thing. Webinars are always kind of weird when you're doing these kind of things, but I really enjoyed it. I look forward to meeting a lot of you and hearing from you about what you're doing with Kendo UI, and hopefully meeting you guys at conferences and talking more about this. So Thanks all. Enjoy the rest of your day.